Right. Thanks a lot, Nick. My name is Peter Fellini. I'm one of the social engineers at Compass IT. And Patrick, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Patrick Laverty, also one of the testers here at Compass CyberGuard, where we do all kinds of tests, typical penetration tests, but one of the types that we really enjoy doing is these social engineering engagements as well. So looking forward to this.
Great. Right. What we're going to be discussing right now is actually preparing for a social engineering engagement. Things that should be reviewed, taking a look at, way to plan it, some of the aspects of social engineering. Um, so first thing is, what is social engineering? We've got to define what social engineering is first. And Patrick, you want to talk about this at all?
I love this one. This is any act that causes someone to take an action that may or may not be in their best interest. And one of the things that I like to point out with that, especially, is a word that you don't see in there. Because all too often, when I discuss social engineering with people, one of the things that often comes up is that social engineering is manipulation. And that's like a word that I like to try to avoid when it comes to defining social engineering. And because manipulation is a form of social engineering, but not all social engineering is manipulation. Really, the difference in the way that I like to look at this is that if we do a good social engineering engagement, a professional one, when we're all done, nobody's going to feel really too bad about it. I can't really fully control, somebody feeling bad about the social engineering engagement going poorly. But really, what my goal with this is to ensure that when we're done, it's really going to be a win-win where we are able to test everything that we were looking to test. We are able to show where there might be any kind of weaknesses. We might be able to also show where there's room for improvement. So I really like to see this social engineering as a win-win type of situation where the difference with manipulation is I win, you lose. So I like to kind of come into it that way. And that is really the mindset that I like to take with this is to avoid that mindset of manipulation, which is win at all costs, where somebody is really going to feel bad, where somebody's going to feel truly tricked or used or manipulated at the
Yeah,
end. So that's the definition that I like to use for this.
exactly, Patrick. Manipulation kind of has a negative connotation, like, I've been owned. And honestly, the way Patrick and I go about the social engineering engagements, as he said, it's a win-win situation. We like to let people feel better for meeting us. Would that be a true statement, Patrick?
Absolutely. Yeah,
They can feel better.
and I think one of the ones that I don't know if it's one that we planned on talking about, where you and I did one together, and eventually through the course of the engagement, we got caught. And then I think at the end, when we were doing a little debrief, especially with the people that caught us,
Yeah,
they understood where it was going, and we were being able to explain to them how well they did in order to catch us in all the different places along the way that they could have done different things to have caught us earlier.
that's when we brought out the flipper, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
So, um, so that's really what social engineering is, a definition of it. Um, let's be interactive here. Uh, Nick's going to be, uh, you said earlier, post things up in the chat and stuff if you have any questions for us. Um,
Yeah, really, the goal there is to show everybody how to make life more difficult for us because sometimes we do these engagements and honestly, it's just too easy because people haven't thought about some of these types of things before. So, really, what we're trying to do is to help you to learn to make this more difficult for us based on some of the mistakes that others have made or the lack of preparation that they've had in the past. So when we come in and when you hire us to do some of these types of engagements, it's already harder for us. And if you have questions about ways that you can stop certain things, happy to answer those as well. So
absolutely. So. Here's a definition or a list of different types of social engineering. We've got phishing, vishing, whaling, on-premise tailgating. Um, Also, there should be spear phishing in here. And, if you'd like, we can go through the definition of each of them. Phishing, that's sending out emails and trying to get somebody to either provide information, click on a link, something like that. You want to take over phishing?
Oh, sure. Phishing is voice phishing, phone calls. So anytime that we call somebody on the phone, trying to get information out of them just over the phone, whether that's directly to an individual or into a service desk or the reception, anything like that as well.
Whaling would be actually going after the whales of the company. We do OSINT investigation. What we'll do is we'll actually open source intelligence gathering on the company and find out who the big guys are in the company, who the key players are within the company, and that's where the whaling and the spearfishing go into play. Whaling is going after the big guys. Spearfishing is actually trying to go after specific people within the company. The CFO, people who are holding the purse strings. Um, you want to go on the on-prem?
Sure, the on-premise, we're actually trying to get access into sensitive areas of your building, or in some cases, even just getting access into the building. So you can kind of think about some of those when you start thinking about how to prepare for these. How is somebody going to access? And start thinking a little bit like how a malicious actor might, where are they going to come right through the front door? Are they going to come in during business hours? Are they going to look for back doors? Are they looking for unlocked doors? And once they get in, what else are they looking for? Because all too often, one of the things that we notice is a lot of buildings are like M&Ms, where they have that hard, crunchy outside, but once you get in, it's all squishy on the
Yeah.
inside.
And
So
just because somebody's carrying a ladder, got a hard hat and a high vis vest, doesn't mean that they're construction. So the tailgating, this is actually following somebody into the premise. Um, the tailgating might be in a smoking area, just hanging out in the smoking area, and as people start to funnel back into the building, following those people back in. One of the engagements that we were on, we used one of our other engineers for this, and she's a female. And actually, she and I were sitting at a bench outside the cafeteria, and I saw some individuals start to funnel in, and I actually said, "I'll pick you up later after work, honey." And she followed those other people in, and I left. So, and once she was inside the building, she gave me access to getting in. So those are some of the other things. Tailgating. You want to talk about tailgating? Some of the instances where you've
yeah, I
had
think the other one was that same engagement that you and I did, where we did dress up as construction workers. We had the hard hat, the visibility vests, and carrying a ladder. Walked up to the front door, and because we looked so awkward trying to carry the ladder, an employee, just said, "Do you need me to let you in?" To which Pete and I just said, "Yes, we do. We need you to let us in." So if you've ever heard the old phrase that you can get into anywhere if you're carrying a ladder, so far that's been proven true in our experience.
yes. Uh, no, no day at the breach. 68% of the breaches involved the human element. The human element is, as Patrick stated earlier, that manipulation. Um, any questions or actually, Patrick, any comments on this slide?
Yeah, I think that really what some of the data here is for is to really show people that we've done a pretty good job of locking down that exterior. And we're probably preaching to the choir here with the type of people that are going to attend this presentation. You understand that the human element is going to be a huge vulnerability. So I like to put in these types of statistics there so you can still understand, or even take it back to other people who don't see this as much of a big deal, that the probably this, as this stat shows, 2/3 of the time, all those data breaches that we get notifications for, that we hear on the news, somewhere along the way in those, there was a human element, and it's going to be one of those types that we talked about earlier, whether it's going to be that phishing or the phone call voice phishing. Another one that we see that it's caused a couple breaches as well, we call smishing, which is SMS phishing, text messages. So that's where this is really showing that because we've figured out how to shut down the exterior of our networks from a technical perspective, that now the attackers are moving on to the human element, and that is going to be the next area that we really need to focus on and lock these things down as well, with thinking about all the different ways that this access happens. Yeah, we just got some more statistics for you here, where we see that so many of these types of attacks do rely on social engineering, and your average business faces 700 social engineering attacks annually. If you're somebody who works on the blue team, on the SOC, you're seeing all types of attacks all day. If you look at the logs, you're seeing hundreds and thousands of just attacks against your network every day. Where these social engineering attacks take a little bit more effort, they take more work, where it is going to be the phishing attacks that are happening. That is going to be one attack that can happen. You get the phone calls that are happening. So you can kind of see where those take a little bit more work compared to those technical attacks that you see in the logs, but they are still happening over and over again. And if they're done really well, it's not one that your business is really going to even notice. It's possible that you've had some social engineering attacks against the company that the people didn't even know. Another example, while we're starting to tell stories a little bit, I recently did a social engineering engagement, and I was tasked with accessing 3 different locations for this one company. And on the second location, they did a perfect job. As soon as we showed up, the manager approached me, checked who I was, checked the validation, nothing, of course, checked out. So he told me I had to leave. And he then started notifying his higher ups. But notice I said that was the second one, because it was still 2 or 3 weeks later when I went in to see my point of contact and handed over the report to him. And he's reading through the report, and then he saw the first facility. I'm like, all your people were aware that I got stopped at that second one, and they didn't even let me approach the third. Were they aware of what happened at the first one? And he just looked at me with big wide eyes. He's like, no. And he starts looking through the report, and you could see all the sensitive areas that I got into. So that was one that I was able to get in, get to the sensitive areas, and get out without them even knowing. So if I was truly a malicious actor, that could fall into this 700 that doesn't even get counted. And Pete and I have done others as well, where we go in and out, don't set off any kind of alarms, anything like that. The company had no idea that we were even there.
Yep. We've actually been into another facility, and I think it was like the second or third facility that we were in, and that's when alarms started to trip, but they didn't know about the first and second one.
Right.
In some of the areas that we've been into, it was kind of like, head scratching. So
So we just want to make sure that people are going to be ready for these types of attacks. And by being ready, you'll see as we go through this, we're really going to be talking about ensuring that you have the policies, the procedures, and the training in place, because that's really what we're doing here. We are testing your policies, your procedures, and seeing if the employees understand the training. Now, one of the other things that we see and we hear all the time is that people are dumb and people are the problem. And that's one thing that I really like to try to avoid, because really everybody wants to do the right thing. And the way that they're going to understand to do the right thing is through their training. And if you're somebody that creates that training or really understands it, and you see somebody that still isn't doing the right things, you might think, well, they're dumb because this is pretty straightforward. Or is that a question of the comprehension of the training? Is that a question of something that was missed during the training? And remember, the training is really going to be based upon what are your policies and procedures? Do you have policies and procedures on what to do when each one of these types of social engineering attacks comes up? Because I can tell you that another thing that we like to do during these engagements is we will adjust. So we will see what some of your policies and procedures are. And once we can find that gap, we're going to go after that gap.
Go
That's
after the game.
that we're
Yep.
really looking for. That's what we're here to do, is to show you where those gaps are so you can continue to close those.
And if we're caught, do people know who to report to an incident? Are they afraid of reporting an incident? You've got to honestly make everybody aware of where to report the incident, and don't feel bad or ashamed that an incident occurred. But they've got to be able to report that up the chain and across, in a timely manner. And we've noticed that stops a lot of our attacks.
Another comment just came in, not as much of a question, but a comment from Tom Hart. Hi, Tom. Long time no see. Another physical method: make a laminated ID card to show if it looks official, they may let you in. Great tip.
And could you extrapolate or go into that, Nick?
It was just
Make a
a
laminated
comment,
card?
just an audience comment, kind of a tip.
Yeah, I think
Right,
Tom's
because
referring to cloning badges.
Yeah.
Patrick and I do make our own badges. And what we'll do is we'll take a look at what the company is using as a badge and try and recreate that badge, or actually, depends on who our pretext is going in. We may create badges that look like official badges of what we're trying to, go in as.
Now, could you expand upon that? How would you typically conduct the research to find out what their official badge looks like without being able to potentially hold one in your hand?
Well, we do the OSINT. Sometimes you've got employees that may take a picture of themselves and post it on some type of social media, and they've got a badge hanging from their neck. We can take a look at that and go from there. We actually do reconnaissance, and we'll go into these facilities ahead of time, a couple days, couple weeks ahead of time. And if we can snap a photo of a badge, we'll try and recreate that badge.
Or sometimes you don't even have to go to the facility itself. There might be a nearby watering hole, a place that everybody goes for coffee and they leave their badges out. That can be another way that we can see what their badges look like. Or worse, there are also devices that will clone RFID badges. And it's sometimes possible for us to get a copy of what is on that RFID badge and create one that's actually going to work. Because I like the suggestion that Tom made, that you can create a copy of a badge that looks completely real. But one of the defenses for that is once you go to scan it. If that badge doesn't scan in and it doesn't make that correct beep sound,
Yep.
then there should be policies and procedures for something to do when that happens. And that's something for each of you to think about. If you have badges that need to be scanned in, what happens when somebody's badge doesn't work?
One of the places that I found a great watering hole is Dunkin' Donuts, coffee shops. If you go into coffee shops that are local to the facility and bring in a flipper, people have their badges usually hanging off their belt. And usually when you're in the queue for a coffee or something like that, you can take one of these flippers and just reach down and clone their badge. Trends in social engineering. The best day of the week to compromise is on Tuesday. Tuesdays, they found out there's been a lot of research on this, and they found out that Tuesdays are usually the biggest day for a social engineering engagement. They've also found out that they've narrowed the time frame down between noon and 4 p.m. and 4 p.m. and 8 p.m. Eastern time. And the reason for the noon to 4 Eastern is that's right after lunch. People are a little lethargic. Uh, and up to 4 p.m., people are getting ready to go home. And the reason why the 4 to 8 p.m. is the West Coast.
Did they have any data on why Tuesdays?
It was just a bunch of data that was provided, and I don't think there was any reasoning on why Tuesdays. Patrick, do you know anything on that?
No, I'm actually kind of surprised by that data, only because from my own experience, I've had a lot of best success later in the week. One example was one of the first phone phishing engagements that I ever had to do. Was that I started making the phone calls actually on the Friday around 3 p.m. And I called for about an hour and a half, and I had about an 80 to 90% success rate, me being able to get the information. And the information that I was getting was I was trying to talk people into going to a website where they had to log in. So on a Friday afternoon between 3:30 and the end of the day, I was having huge success, 80 to 90%. And I'm like, okay, here I was thinking I'm the greatest thing in the world. I'm the best social engineer in the world, being able to get all this information. But I didn't get all the way through the list that I was given. So I started up again on Monday morning around 10 a.m. and my success rate dropped to about 10%.
Sure.
So I figured out that it is when the people start to get tired, and maybe Tuesday could potentially be because statistically, people are going to be taking long weekends. People take Friday off, and that was the day after the Monday when people are all refreshed, that the attacks were more successful.
Yeah. And some of the pretexts that we've identified: HR, IT, training, and others. Let's face it, when HR speaks, people listen. Now, this photograph, this is Chris Hadnaghi, and this is actually out at DEF CON, the social engineering, uh, village. I've actually been in that booth. I've actually competed 5 times during this. And what this is actually, we compete doing social engineering. We're given a target. We do OSINT investigation on that target. We write a report up on it. What are some of the pretexts we're going to use? Some of the phone numbers that we're going to use. This is actually what a nefarious person would do ahead of time, probably, is the same exact thing that we did out at DEF CON. And at that point, we're given 15 to 20 minutes to contact our targets, and using our pre-checks, see what type of information that we can get on that. Some of the information that possibly your employees are putting out on social media, that's where I did a lot of my research, is on social media. Patrick, anything to add to this?
Yeah, I think you've hit on that. That's really how we prepare for those types of engagements, for those phishing calls, is with all that preparation.
The fun stuff, the B&Es. This is actually the senior vice president for Compass. This is Jesse. One of the things that we tested out was, he's got a can of air here that, for cleaning off keyboards and stuff. And as you can see in this top screen, you can see a burst right here. And this is the air going up to the motion detector, and we're able to get in.
I had some insight too, or some comments regarding the previous conversation regarding the days. Thomas had commented that I found the day before a holiday is very successful. So that's a good piece of information. And then somebody else chimed in. Tuesdays are normally a lull day. Things normally quiet down versus after Wednesday. Both interesting and great insights. Thank you both very much.
Thank you. And these are some of the things that Patrick and I talked about: shoulder surfing, tailgating, fake badges. That who was it? Thomas that mentioned that,
Yep.
and the open and run. Here are some of the tools that a social engineer might use. This is an under the door breach, and there's a spring steel right here, and there's a piece of fishing line with a loop. And what they'll normally do is they'll fish these under the doors and up to the latches and pull the string. I've actually done this myself at an insurance company. Um, Here it is right here in this shot right here. Patrick, have you used these at all?
Not had the opportunity to use one of those under the door tools yet. No.
Okay. And then here's spraying the can of air up to the motion detector. I think this is a picture of Deviant that did it. Deviant's a well-known social engineer. He's usually out at Black Hat and DEF CON.
Another comment was, I have used just a piece of paper to slice through the top before.
To get through this part right here, through the glass door.
That's as far as the comment went, but I would assume so.
I've actually used a ruler, a metal ruler, sticking it through the door and just wiggling it, and it actually popped the motion detector. This is we talk about this being the fun stuff. The fun stuff is actually on the right side of the screen. And this is probably walking through Home Depot and picking up different tools that can actually do breaches. One of the gigs that I was on, I was visiting a data center and I said, this is going to be an easy break-in. And they invited me outside the door. They're like, what do you need? And I said, all I'm going to need is a coat hanger and a ruler. So they provided that to me. And I actually got all the way in through the man trap into the data center. And what I did was, when I was outside, I noticed that there was a motion detector to pop the doors. I stuck a ruler through there. I wiggled it, popped that door, walked to the next door with a coat hanger. I put it through the latch, pulled the door open. I walked around, and they were like, "Ha, you're gonna get caught at the man trap." At the man trap, it was a false floor. So I pulled up a tile. I crawled under the floor, pushed the tile up on the other side, and I just kind of waved to him. So here's some of the other fun stuff. It's actually removing a door from the door frame. Depends on where your pins are for your latches, latches. And this is another breach tool. And actually, Patrick, we use this one right here.
Yep, just a piece of plastic, a shim.
Yep. We actually on one of our gigs, we came up through the fire doors and in the stairwell, and coming in, they allowed us to do this. So we actually breached the door, and there wasn't a latch that we could manipulate on our side of the door. So we had to use this plastic and fish it through the door and then push it down and pull it to open the door. So again, some of the other breach tools. A lot of these breach tools can be created just by going into Home Depot and getting a piece of spring steel. And bending it in a certain way. So when you put it through a door, like these doors, there's probably a quarter of an inch gap. You can put it through that door and you can manipulate that, the push bar. How are criminals using social engineer to take advantage of the elderly? There's we actually at Compass, we visit uh, senior centers and we talk about this part of it, the sad stuff. Um, identifying and helping the seniors identify some of the things that are going on and how they're being manipulated. Um, a lot of the things that, like Patrick talked about earlier, people want to help everybody. Uh, One of the things that uh, we leverage is empathy. And that's that person trying to help somebody else. Um, and, senior citizens, they're very empathetic. So this is an Uber driver lost her life because of a malicious social engineering scheme. Um, Education is your best defense. Again, identify. We want to identify for our employees who they can talk to, how they can report something, um, things to look for. Patrick, any comments
Yeah,
on that?
yeah, I think we're going to go over a lot of the great ways to stop these types of things soon here. So you want to talk about some of these, Pete?
Yeah, you want to go ahead. I've been
Okay.
talking.
Cool. So these are probably some of the things that a lot of you already have in place that are going to stop some of the what is it, the low hanging fruit. So we have the macros that come through email. It's pretty rare now that we see that macros are going to be on by default, or even that they can get through. Most virus checks are going to prevent macros that are going to be automatically runnable, and those are often little mini scripts that come in Microsoft Office documents. So that is the type of thing that we'll typically use to try to get more access within a network. And like I said, they are frequently disabled by default. So we might send somebody an Excel worksheet. We might send somebody a Word document that has some of these macros embedded, but they're not going to be able to run by default. And even worse, if the person tries to enable them, they're going to get all kinds of warnings that tell them, you probably don't want to do this. That's really where a lot of that social engineering is going to come into place, where we need to talk them past that and give them a good reason to still enable those. And sometimes it can be something as simple as curiosity that gets people to disable those. For example, something that we might send out is an Excel sheet that has bonuses on it, but the whole thing is just kind of grayed out or is obfuscated. And it says that in order to see these, you need to enable macros, or any kind of other financial documents, things like that. People get curious about what those are. And we can kind of send them to them and make it sound as though it was accidental, where the CFO meant to send it to the CEO and fat fingered the email address that went in there as well. Multi-factor authentication is a great thing to have into place, because we see that the data breaches are happening all the time. We do not want to rely on just username and password. We want to also have this multi-factor authentication in place as well, which I think nowadays, hopefully, most people do. One of the things to take a look at is, do you have multi-factor authentication in all the places that it needs to be? Because we think about that usually with the VPN, we think about that with email, and sometimes even just logging on to our workstations. But once we're in there and people need to authenticate into other areas, is there still the multi-factor authentication in place there? One of the things that I like to check with that is also when I'm doing internal network tests. So basically, if I'm doing a pen test inside somebody's network, which is maybe just an assumed breach kind of thing, or maybe you have a malicious employee. Maybe you have somebody that did just walk into the building. So they are already inside your network. All too often, multi-factor authentication is not in place from the inside. And that's one of the things that I like to check as well. And just like everything else with this, it's really going to be about your own risk appetite for this. Because I know there are lots of times that we can make recommendations and it just slows down the business too much. So there's always going to be that whole balance of risk, because we know the only computer that is safe is the one that is all smashed up in a million pieces and dropped in the middle of the ocean. So you need to kind of figure out somewhere in between where we're going to have that as well. We mentioned earlier the training and education and making sure that that is something that doesn't become overbearing and something that people are still paying attention to as well, to make sure that they are understanding it and knowing what are going to be the new types of attacks that are becoming as well.
Excellent. You know, one of the things that I like to say is catch them doing something right instead of doing something wrong. Award those star players. You know, we have one customer that actually, if somebody catches us doing some type of social engineering at their facility, they actually give them challenge coins, the people who catch us. So, and I love collecting challenge coins. So, you know, it's just one of those things. It's a small token, but it shows that you appreciate your employees, you appreciate what they're doing to protect your environment. You know, these are the keys to the castle. You know, and this is how we're going to get across that moat and into your castle. So,
and the other thing that does is that little $3 to $5 token that they gave out to the person that caught us, that also becomes peer pressure. There's so many other people that are going to want, and when it's hanging up in someone's cubicle at their desk, others are going to stop by and say, "What is that?" And when the person starts telling them, "Well, I got that from the security department because I stopped this social engineering attack," others might say, "Well, that's pretty cool. How do I get one of those?" And they tell them, you need to stop one of these types of attacks. And we saw that there's 700 of them per year. So there's plenty of opportunities for people to be able to see these. So like I said, just for that $3 to $5 token, you can have people that are more aware, more educated, and more willing to shut down these types of attacks, as opposed to people that say, like, that's not my job. I don't care about that. You can make it their job. You can make them interested in it just with this really small token of appreciation for them.
Well, one other comment that came in is we've recently seen scammer getting end users to enable quick assist in Office.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm not familiar with Quick Assist itself, but I'm guessing it's one of those remote access connections into somebody's machine, which, yeah, there's going to be lots of people out there that are trying to explain, because the vast majority of people are just not super technical on the IT part. So as soon as somebody contacts them and starts talking to them on the phone and starts getting into some of the more technical aspects and explaining how important this is. For example, one of the pretexts that I've used in the past when I do some of these voice phishing calls is, like Pete mentioned earlier, IT is one of the best pretexts. So I will sometimes call somebody in the morning and say, last night we tried to push updates out to all the machines in the company, and the update did not go through on yours. Can we figure out why the update didn't go through? And of course, I'm going to just start going through gibberish with them and things that don't make much sense. I'm not going to use that pretext against somebody in the IT department themselves, but I'm going to use that against somebody else and just hope that I can kind of talk my way past them and eventually frustrate them to the point where I can say, you know what, I can just log into your computer and do this myself, and we'll be done in 5 minutes. So I'm just going to send you this link, or you can just go to this URL, read off the URL to them, and there can be that type of connection in there as well. So
right.
That's going to be the type of thing that's going to fall under this user education and training about being able to validate who they are talking to. And I think, Pete, going forward, I think we have some more of these defenses that we can talk about as well.
Sure.
One quick question to throw in there, you guys. Somebody said, AI tools, what factors should be considered when using AI tools for phishing/user awareness campaigns?
I'd love this now, because my answer to anything about AI is nothing's different. So as we have right up here on the prevention, nothing changes. Everything is still going to be verification and validation. So everything that we do, somebody calls you on the phone and says they are the CEO. Say, great. I will call you right back at the official number. That is a way that you can shut down that type of vishing phone call. Somebody emails you and says, I need XYZ. Cool. Call them on the phone at the correct phone number and validate that. Anything that is going to be done through AI, which is going to be any of these videos, it's all going to be the same thing. If somebody contacts you, what you really need to have in your corporate environment is a culture of acceptance for people to want to do this verification and validation. Another story that I like to tell to people lots of times is there a company that I used to work for many years ago, and my department and I was in charge of the first day onboarding security presentation. So during the first day onboarding, when you're signing all the paperwork and I-9 forms or W-4 forms, all those types of things, they would also bring in people from the security department, my department, and give a little talk about here's how you avoid phishing, here's how you avoid vishing, all these types of things. And one of the things that we had at that company was a strong culture of ensuring that when you're inside the building, your ID badge is out. And if it is not out, that it is accepted and expected that somebody else asks to see the badge. And I remember there was this one great story where somebody left that training on their first day and they walked out and somebody was walking down the hall and noticed they didn't have their badge out. So the new employee just walked up to him and said, I just went to this training. I was taught that we need to ask people to see their badges. Do you mind? Can I see your badge? And the person gave him a huge smile, said, you're right, pulled it out, showed it to him, and it turned out to be the CEO. So a few minutes later, we got an email from the CEO to the entire company saying, this person did it exactly right. That is exactly what I want to see from everybody. So if the CEO is willing to take out his ID badge and is willing to tell the entire company, this is what I want, that is a culture that the entire company is going to also be able to do. Because I know all too often we are afraid of that type of engagement. We're afraid to ask because the vast majority of time it's going to be valid and the person could very easily be like, oh, this is a pain. I don't need to show you my badge. I work here. But when the CEO is telling you that's how I want it and that's the way to do it, that's going to really help throughout the company. So all of these types of things are going to be the same. I keep asking every time I do these presentations, can somebody come up with a social engineering attack that proper verification or validation will not help? And so far, nobody has come up to me with one of those. So looking at the origin, meaning who sent that email, who sent that text message. You can also ask, like I said, by not replying, by calling them back at the correct number. If somebody says, well, I'm not at that number, I'll call your manager then. I'm not going to call you back at the number that you give me as well. Like we just talked about seeing the ID badge. If somebody doesn't have their ID badge and it's your company policy that they are supposed to, let's go escort them to the security desk to make sure that they are going to get either a temporary badge for the day or a visitor badge or a new badge, anything like that. Or if you're afraid to escort somebody, at least call security and tell them that you saw somebody who admitted they don't have a badge in the area, and it's up to them then to come find them. The other thing that we see with these is when we do these on-site, on-premise engagements is we always have to bring a social engineering permission letter. And what that does is that gives us permission to be there, as opposed to if we don't have permission, we are legally breaking the law with trespassing and some of the other things that we could be doing on that site. So we always get a permission letter that is signed by people who have the authority to give us permission to be there. That's something that we're very cognizant of, that we're not just talking to somebody in the company who doesn't have that ability, because we've seen cases in the past where politics can get involved and the hierarchy can get involved with a person that signs it actually didn't have permission, and the person that did isn't aware of it. I just had one a couple of weeks ago where it got stopped at a facility, and somebody with a C in their title tried to come out and said, "You don't even have permission to be here." And even when I showed the permission letter, they still claimed that that wasn't valid. Turned out that person was wrong, that everything was fine. T's were crossed, I's were dotted. It was all good. That person was just not too thrilled with some of the things that we were able to do as well. So if
Yep.
you are able to verify and validate, that's going to work. Like I mentioned, if those AI video calls come in, if the CEO calls you on a video call and says, "I need you to go get $500 worth of gift cards and call me back with those numbers," let's verify and validate that with the CEO's office, because maybe it is AI. And if that you have a company culture that is security focused, that CEO is going to fully support you making that callback because it's going to save them that money.
Yep. So on this screen, preparing for a social engineering assessment, key steps: define the scope and objective. This is something that Patrick was talking about earlier, and we're not going to step over those boundaries. As long as the scope and objectives are defined, and we're going to ask for that get out of jail free card. We're going to abide by that, but actually define the scope and objectives of what you want to accomplish, what you want to have accomplished. Address critical legal and ethical considerations to ensure compliance. Prepare your team with essential training to recognize social engineering tactics. This is the training that Patrick and I have been talking about. Have those policies, procedures in place, training your employees, award the successes. Don't punish somebody who gets socially engineered, because any one of us can, and probably we've all been social engineered at some point in our life. Establish clear communication protocols for smooth coordination. This is all right. Social engineering gig just came through. I caught Patrick. Who do I contact? What do I do? It's critical not merely to teach, but to teach and test. So, rinse and repeat.